Hello, hello, everyone. It is Friday, and we are here with Thorne Waya Davis, and we have a special guest, Dana, Dana Walls.
Hello,
How's your day,
everyone.
Dana?
Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored to be here, so thank you.
Nice. So, how much astrology do you know, Dana?
I have been exposed over the years with my friendship with you and with Thorne, and my sister is very deeply into astrology. So I've had quite a bit of exposure, I'd say, over the years. Never personally done a super deep dive, but I do quite enjoy talking about it in the theories and the connections with the real world. So I would say I have a passable, nowhere near you two, obviously, but I would say I have a passing awareness of it.
Okay. And so, what is your job in everyday life? What do you do for a living?
I work as an ASL interpreter. I work full time right now. I'm with the Helena Public Schools here in Montana. I started with a young woman when she was in seventh grade, and now we're in ninth grade. Excuse me, ninth grade. And so that's been really fun. Prior to that, when I lived in Portland, most of my interpreting was freelance, so community, businesses, medical appointments, etc. I also spent a lot of time working for Portland Community College, which is where I graduated from. So it's been an interesting transition to work full time in a schools versus being out in the community.
Okay, so your job every day is to be an ASL sign language interpreter.
That's
Okay.
correct. Yes.
Okay. So we asked Dana to come on today because we're going to focus on translation theory and how it applies to astrologers in general. So Thorne, how's your day? Thorne, Thorne saying, "All right, it's been slow." So, okay, you've been moving slow. You're like, oh, oh no,
Or
it's
the gears going
slow
slow.
day at here. Okay, at work. Okay. Yeah, it's the new moon last night, so I'm like just kind of my mind's kind of going slow. Okay, so Thorne had some comments today about Venus in retrograde, or what do you want to talk about? Okay, this is just brief, Thorne saying. It's just some short commentary about Venus. Because today is Friday, and also we know that Venus, that's Venus Day. So, tomorrow is March 1st, and it's Venus will be going retrograde tomorrow, and it will continue on until April 12th, around that time period. And so the important thing to notice there is that this Venus retrograde will be in Aries. And so that's a different kind of vibe than we are used to with Venus, because we typically tend to see, Venus as being sweet and kind and very open-hearted. You have to understand that with this kind of specific time of energy with Aries, though, it's like, it's Aries is a fire sign. So that type of vibe is very different. Uh, in retrograde would mean that it's going backwards and we're looking inward into our hearts and our relationships, our friendships, our intimate lovers, sweethearts, family relationships, all relationships. And we're going to reanalyze things. And, you say, where am I in relation to this relationship? And where is that other person? Was it balanced? Is it imbalanced? Is it something wrong? Um, and it needs does something need to be repeated to equalize the relationship? So various different things, because the retrograde is connected to all the rewords like reanalyze, recycle, uh, or throw something out, I suppose, review, uh, rethink, and all of those things. For all of those are rewords. So we're going to apply those to the retrograde in general, and any kind of retrograde, like Mercury is communication. We might have to recommunicate something, or, Venus is going to be all relationship focused. So values, things like that. So that's Venus. And then, if it was Jupiter, then it would be related to expansion, anything with expansion. dreaming, goals, things like that. But we have to look in and we'd say, how do we reframe that? And that would be the Jupiter retrograde. So anyway, this applies to Venus. So I want to see how this, the context with Venus retrograde, applies to the current situation, not only our, personal relationships, but our personal values, but also what's going on in the larger context of the community, politics, government, things like that. There's different things happening and how, Venus relates to that with the connection of relationships or disconnection. So that's my short spiel of what I was wondering about. What I'm sure there'll be a longer spiel later, but yeah. Well, thank you for your thoughts on Venus retrograde. I learned a lot. I'm going to reevaluate all my relationships now.
Same. That was very, very informative. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to reevaluate my relationship with Dana right now.
Right now.
Right now. Wow, it's been pretty good.
We've had a
Um,
good run.
They're saying, the last additional comment would be related to Venus retrograde is that the Aries part is important because Aries is like the warrior. And so that context of energy, with how do we fight, how do we resolve conflict, and how do we approach it, and what are we fighting for? Why are we fighting? All those things are encompassed in that. What is your passion? Things like, what's coming up there? Is there some oppression happening? So all of that is encapsulated in it. Okay, Dana.
Yeah, this is Dana. I just, in my mind, the two words that just sort of automatically went together were warrior and heart. And I think the times right now are really asking for those of us that maybe are part of the LGBTQ or not mainstream. We're sort of friends, we're kind of freaks. We're a little wild. I love that about us. I think that's what makes us unique and wonderful. But I do think that maybe this present time and maybe this transit is asking for us to really find and hold our warrior hearts to kind of help us get through this and stand in solidarity with those who might even need more help or support that we can offer. So thank you for that. I will keep those two words in my heart.
Lauren saying yes to that. I agree with wholeheartedly with Dana. We're gonna hold space for that. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh, warrior heart. That's cool. Hmm. Okay. Get out your warrior heart.
Kalima.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That was really, really great. I like maybe we could have a little like transit update at the beginning of our show. You could do your transit comments. Thorne says I'm down for that. Okay. Okay, well, this is a good segue into interpreting and translation because I want to ask Dana, how was my translation? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Phenomenal as always.
I was kidding because I'm translating for Thorne actually, and this no, no. But it's interesting because why would astrologers really care about translation, and why would our warrior hearts want to discuss that topic? I do think there's a lot of warring in astrology about translations of specific sacred texts, right? So, Thorne, what do you know about translation in astrology in general? What do you know about that already? Thorne's saying, with my background in history and myths and mythology and things like that, I love to read. I'm a nerd, obviously. So I have read a lot, so many books. I've, touched on a lot of topics and, you know, really the core center of this is, I would say, that language does evolve over time. So the written texts do the same parallel thing. For example, Andy has translated books from ancient Greek. Uh, so that language of Greek, how does that translate, you know, how does this sentence itself evolve? And we have to look and think about that. And or how does the language evolve? Sorry. And so how do we still honor that past mindset, that linguistic culture and mindset while getting the appropriate modern, you know, uh, expression of that translation? So I feel that it's really a common challenge for people in astrology of how can we honor that past while connecting it with, setting up our current mindset with that. So yeah. So there's many astrologers who want to uncover these ancient texts. I recently went to a lecture of an Egyptian scholar, who's looking at these ancient, like medical astrology books. And so there's a whole subset of astrology that's history related. And you have to understand that those of us here are not, well, Thorne's a historian, but Dana and I are linguists, right? So it's like I approach that history part as a linguist, right? So let's change to like go to the more ASL side of things to see what we can learn about translation in general. I want to ask the two of you, why are there not standardized signs for the signs? Or are there? Why or why not? Okay, Thorne is saying because all deaf astrologers, we have not gotten together as a big group and discussed those and agreed upon all of those signs. So, yes, I do have a I have some work in developing signs and figuring out my process with those, but other deaf astrologers all over have their own working, developing vocabulary of their signs. So I've noticed that some are similar, and that's fine, but really the bottom line is that deaf people haven't gotten together and agreed upon signs in real time. Okay. Dana, what's your answer to that?
Well, first I would agree with Thorne. I do think that it requires a collective sort of reckoning, right? And we've seen this in the past, particularly with political figures and coming up with appropriate name signs, like Kamala Harris, her name sign was only able to become up appropriately from South Indian and Black women in the deaf community. And so we, as ASL interpreters, I remember when the sign for Black be across the forehead was 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 coined by the Black deaf community, and we as white interpreters were like, "Oh, cool! Now there's a sign we can use." And the Black deaf had to very nicely tell us, "No, no, no. This is our sign. This is an in culture sign. So you, as a white interpreter, your sign for Black is still this. This is our sign." And I think I don't want to muddy the waters because obviously we're talking about astrology and not race identities, but I do think there are corollaries in that. First, I agree with Thorne in that there needs to be sort of a reckoning. There has to be sort of a consensus and agreement. And again, hopefully there are more voices of POC and marginalized groups within that discussion. The second thing is the reason that we don't have a fully standardized set of ASL signs in general, which is regional differences, accents, learning styles. And I think that's part of the beauty of ASL is I can meet somebody from California and I learned sign in Portland and I might say soon and they might say soon. But we can still understand each other, right? All the signs for computer, all the signs for birthday. I think that's part of the beauty of the language is how diverse it is when that does show up. So that's my take. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Thorne. Also, related to the collective community, yes, for sure, because that reminds me of another example that I can put out. In the past, I would say in If I remember my time, I guess it was early 2000s, maybe. Um, maybe a little bit later, I can't remember. The point is there was a group of deaf trans non-binary people, and they were having a discussion about signs for transgender, and they were discussing that concept. And before that, there was really no specific one sign for that. And there was a group of people, and they were discussing it, and they came to agreement on this sign. And so then going forward, that became the sign that was then spread across the culture. And again, things are coming up because in the past there was a few times where hearing people or other, new signers, either of those subsets of people, um, they would evolve the language. They say, why not just change the sign for trans? But we say, no, 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 no. That's not your right. That's not your privilege to change that sign. That's our right. That's our group that's our language. That's our expression of the sign. We've decided on this sign for transgender. So that's another example of where that culture and language overlap with identity. So I'm just putting that out there. Okay. Well, part of me really is in agreement with what you guys are saying. And then part of me is shocked that sign language, or I mean, astrology has been around for 2000 years. Because, okay, in language, there's an evolvative nature to language. That's why it's not a code. Like
Mhm.
English Sign Language is a code. We tell you what it is. Language evolves naturally. For example, computer, when computers showed up, there was several signs, computer, computer, computer. And then people all over who were signing it became computer. Like this is the sign is computer now. You don't see computer anymore because the language itself evolved into the most ergonomic or the most accepted by the language itself from a mathematical perspective. We don't know why computer was accepted ubiquitously, right? But astrology has been around for 2000 years. Don't you think that the signs would have been already formulatized? You know what I mean? Um, Thorne saying, I think that with astrology, people, deaf people, deaf blind people, deaf people who have a connection with astrology in the past, maybe they weren't as involved or they were marginalized or they didn't have the exposure with a place to be there with that, scholarship in being in those discussions, or they weren't able to really be involved. So maybe with ASL astrology, it's still a new territory essentially. Okay, Dana.
This is Dana, and I'll just jump on that. Anytime I think we ask ourselves the question, where is this gap? Why is this missing? I do think I'm just agreeing with Thorne. I think we do have to go back to sort of the concept of the gatekeeping, and that is who has been keeping the gates of knowledge of astrology sort of shut, maybe from deaf scholars, maybe from people that identify as more feminine maybe weren't allowed to study astrology, even though I mean I don't know, Andy. Andy, I would lean on you at this point to maybe educate me a little bit more about the history of astrology. But I do think when we ask ourselves about a deficit, we do have to start asking about who's sort of keeping the gates closed and why.
It's interesting because this show, we're trying to open the gates to deaf astrologers. That's why we're having this show. Because I'm sick and tired of this gate for deaf astrologers. It's like, and Thorne is the top deaf astrologer that I know personally, right? Well,
Amen.
I'm serious.
Amen.
And so who better to open the gate than
Yes.
Thorne? So I think that's why this show. Could it be geographic that in the past, deaf astrologers were in pockets, and now with the internet, they're all able to come together and agree on a sign? So I'm saying it's possible that that is happening. However, since ASL and deaf culture is very 5D, as far as spacious visual and sign, and technology is more 3D. So in a way, yes, it could be that we could get together and discuss it on video, but it's not really the same kind of vibe as in person, a 5D conversation that would really connect everyone. Many deaf people do say, technology is great for many things, but that intrinsic connection is gone, so the tech feels flat.
Mhm.
So if people got together, there would be that would be how the deaf community actually does run, because we do have that intrinsic connection thing.
This
They,
is Dana. It almost seems like what we're saying is we've come one step forward and two steps back, right? Especially in a post-COVID pandemic world where some people still aren't comfortable meeting face to face or being in big groups of people. And so I do think that is something that we also have to consider is yes, we've made astonishing leaps in technology. The three of us, I mean, you two are in Portland, I'm here in Montana, like, and yet here we are having a real-time conversation. That's incredible. But I do agree with Thorne in that I do appreciate the sort of flatness of the 3D screen experience. But if it was for the greater cause of establishing signs specific to astrology, maybe there could be a research conference or something online, and we could be pulling in these deaf voices from across the country. So that is, I think, something worth keeping on the table.
well, I remember the Deaf Spiritual Network. Do you guys remember that? Yeah, DSN. They tried to get together for a conference, but it didn't happen. I don't know. They're saying it wasn't, it just didn't happen. Well, we know that any type of community gathering where they have that idea and that vision, but the bottom line is who will be following through and planning and who will be willing to be responsible. And also, personally, um, everyone can connect and can they get along? Can everyone agree? Or how can they actually organize, if there's a conflict or not conflict, so to be honest, it just didn't happen. Okay, so how important is it for us to create formulaic standardized signs for the signs? Is it okay to just agree with your interpreter that we're going to sign this and then that's enough? Or do we need standardized signs for the signs? I'm saying, I would say the bottom line, if it's important to have a baseline of understanding of, you know, some common signs that we do have. You have to understand that some will be rejected or kind of bounce out. And, they'll be in different locations. It really depends on where people are from, what their identity is, and all that kind of stuff. Dana, did you have a comment?
I do think there is benefit to having a standardized set of signs as someone who's interpreted in various fields like medicine, physics, chemistry, biology. Many of those signs are enshrined, and those come to us either from the Rochester School of the Deaf, or other colleges and universities where deaf scholars have come up with these signs. So being able to go online and access that as a resource as an interpreter, know that I'm using an appropriate sign, regardless of my student, is very comforting. I really appreciate that. And that does demonstrate that time and effort from those deaf scholars and professionals to film themselves and upload these signs so that 2, 3 years later, here I come. What's the sign for Adam? Adam. Um, and so I think there's benefits to having it, and I think there's definitely, I would say there's negatives to not having it. I would say there's benefits to having it, and yes, I'm still with both of you in that. I question why here we are 2,000 years later and there's nothing really yet. So that is puzzling. I apologize. I do have to let my dog back in, so I'm gonna mute and go blank just so you don't hear me talking to talking
We'll
to.
let you let your dog. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you. I'm happy to be allowed.
I'm just kidding. Oh
Let
my God,
me.
such a Scorpio. Okay, but there are actually basic 12 signs for the signs. I mean, I think we do have a kind of a standardized, like some, like Aries, but like Taurus, Gemini, there's a standard set, you think? And Thorne saying in general, yes. Oh, hold on one second. My coworker wants to say hello. Well, it's just me. Guess I'll take a chill. I'll just chill here. I'll show you guys some unicorns. Unicorns. I love them. Yeah, you love unicorns. Yeah. You crocheted one for me. I still have it. I love it. It's on my bed. Oh. Did you name it yet? I haven't named it. I'm waiting for the spirit to tell me the name, or for it to tell me its name. It has to let me know. I'll let you know. Okay. You have to give it a name sign. I will after it lets me know. We have to agree. I'll be like, do you like this name sign? If it accepts it, then kind of thing. Okay. But back to the signs for the astrology signs. In ASL, yeah, there is a baseline. We do have some common signs. But maybe there's a few differences. And that's just because of, accents and geographics and things like that, and that's fine. So again, we haven't really, you know, just gotten together and agreed upon things yet, and I plan to actually work towards that. I'm on so did you say you're on deaf time for that? Oh, it's a perfect timing for that work, that goal, of opening that discussion, and that energy and letting it through. And that is so Gemini on 11. It's like getting together a community to discuss linguistics and like language. I think that's so Gemini on 11. But so it sounds like the correct process is to allow the deaf community to get together and discuss it and decide, and then, you know, let people know what they decided and that these are the signs. I mean, do you think that's the right? Uh, yeah, the deaf astrologers actually, Thorne saying, not just general deaf people. No, the deaf astrologers actually would have to talk about it and then start, what's that word, Dana?
Germinating it out. Yeah.
Germinating. Yeah. I was gonna say infiltrating. That's not
Oh,
the
I like
right. Infiltrating. Okay. What is it? Pollinating. Pollinate.
pollinating.
Okay. Good,
Ooh,
good
we have a $10
interpreter.
word in the hat. Yes.
Yeah, I do have an
Yeah,
interpreter in me, sort of thing. Okay. Okay, are you ready for the next question?
please.
Okay, I'm still working on the basic idea of linguistics. Okay, so I'm a Socratic professor. So we ask weird questions sometimes to uncover things. Okay, I'm going to ask you guys, this is totally not astrology related. What's the sign for inflammation? Inflammation. What's the sign?
I'm going to defer to the deaf person.
Okay, good job. Good job. Always defer to the deaf people. Okay. What's this? I'm curious to see what you're going to see, Dana. Say, Dana. Um, uh, Soren saying it depends on the context. That word inflammation means, for example, if there's a story about inflammation of the body, the physical body, you could show where it is in the body. For example, the throat, it would be like this, like, or the hand, it would be like this on the hand, or if it's the foot, it would be the foot, and it's my toe is is this sign. It's like this sign. Okay. So that, or if the brain is injured,
Mm,
like in the blank brain, there's inflammation in the brain. It would be, where is it in the brain? You'd show the brain, and then you'd show this kind of, swelling shape of hand shape. But specifically, if it's an organ in the body, it's the liver or the kidneys. You show the shape, where's that organ and what it looks like. And then you would show where it is on the bottom. It's like this, or like this, or on the side. So something like that. The shape and size. Okay. And then inflammation, geez. It's the same idea related to animals. Like if the human body or an animal body would be the same, would be the shape and the concept. And um inflammation. I'm trying to think what other context there would be. If it's related to disease, it applies to which type of disease and which symptom, and it would apply to only the brain or the body, or related to the other something behind it, like the environment or the exposure, um, the disorder or something, the mental disorder that caused that inflammation to happen, to show up, so because my philosophy is that the energy and everything started with energy on the energy level first, and then it would show up later in the physical body, in the physical space. If it shows up there, then it would just be energy first, and then it would trickle down to the mental and emotional and spiritual and physical and all that stuff, and it pops up. Okay. So that's all of that encapsulated. There you go. All right. Great job. Dana, your turn.
that's exactly what I was planning to say.
You guys, it's a simple English word, inflammation. It shouldn't be
uh,
this hard. Okay, go ahead, Dana. Your turn.
I do agree though in that yes, it is. It's location specific, it's body part specific, and then it is that sort of puff cheek. Yeah, like I liked the like my, or when my tooth was infected. I was telling you guys about, and I was like, it was, you know, so that. But Andy, no, I'm curious. Why do you ask? Why do you ask about that
Well,
specific
first,
word?
I wanna add something because I think you guys aren't really getting it.
Okay,
No offense. No
none
offense.
taken.
Having a discussion. Are you guys offended?
No.
Inflammation is usually red, right? So you have to be like red. This is more swelling, but inflammation is like red, or like heat. It's heat. Thorne's saying it's heat. Yeah. Okay, so like if you had your throat was inflamed, it would be like red.
Mine 2 days ago. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Or
But
if your
yeah, red,
teeth
Andy. That's excellent. That's an
red,
excellent observation that we
red.
both missed that.
What? Thorne's the deaf person. What's up? Okay. See, Thorne's saying, okay, but that you have to understand. I can say that that's related to a part of the generalized context, where in hearing culture, that word typically is used, but where my understanding is with this is that in a medical way, but if more specifically the word inflammation, then it's like, oh, I know where the context is coming from. Then, I would explain more. And you did a great job. Like the Socratic professor in me is trying to cause a fight, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like a simple English word. Okay, let's do another one. Let's do another one. What's the sign for congestion? Congestion. Okay, Dana, you have to go first.
So similar. Am I imagining myself to be in a medical appointment and we're trying to ask questions from a patient, or are you like my team and we're working at PSU and you're like, hey, this New York Times article is talking about congestion. What's do you have a sign? What's the it
Maybe I'm
depends.
talking about traffic.
Oh, totally. See, my mind was stuck on the medical, which would again be more of a classifier, right? It would we would start with a location and then continue to drill down into running, inflammation, stuck, stuffy. But yeah, like what about congestion?
Like, okay, so for people watching who don't know what we're talking about, a classifier is a hand shape used to show something um like
Car,
your eyes popping out of your head. These are a classifier. It's a classifier or like a knob. I'm turning it. That's the same classifier used to show a different thing. So ASL is totally different than English. What? So okay, so congestion, you're saying it could mean a runny nose,
right? Because that could be one of the symptoms that's manifesting, or it could be a blocked nose. I think in
right?
English we use both to say, "Oh, I'm just feeling really congested." I might be over here doing this, or I might be like,
Right. Okay. Thorne. Okay, another option would be not only the nose, but it could be connected to like if the throat it was like stopped up or like closed up. Or also it could be a different like traffic. So there's many different kinds of traffic. So it depends on how many lanes there are for traffic. Is it a two-way highway? Is it a freeway? Is it going two lanes? That means that we could slow down and go, that congestion could mean that we're slowing down, or it could be it's so thick and then you're totally slowed down, hardly moving. And like, if it's a four-lane highway, then it's just traffic backed up like this. All the cars are stopped. See this look. So that could be there's just all these context keys. Once we know the context and we can set it up first, then it's which lane, which word, with all these things, then we can figure out how to sign it. So that's what we're saying. Woo! Okay, Dana.
Can I just add to that? Sometimes, like when people ask me about my job, I like to describe it as riding a horse while playing chess while speaking Mandarin. Because given these two very simple English words that we have used every day, all of our lives, interpreting in real time is bananas.
Yeah.
Like what we do is bananas because we are making so many inferences constantly. And so, wow. I
Was
just
it a
really
good lesson?
your brains. So
Okay. So those are two words that just came up in my workday today. And I was just like, oh, I'm gonna throw those out.
I love it. What a great discussion.
Okay. But many astrologers who read translated books think that you can just translate a word for another word. Okay. For example, you know, uh, what if I said the word progression? Okay, an astrological progression. It's like, what's your sign for progression? I mean, it's hard to explain, but it's like this is different than coding words with a sign, which we're talking about with the astrological signs, right? We're kind of codifying signs for nouns or
Mhm,
something. But then we get a concept it's more complex and can't be translated in one word,
mhm.
right? So for example, what is zodiacal releasing? You know that word? Zodiacal releasing? Okay. I've seen that. Thorne saying I've seen that, right? So there's this big discussion in astrology is where is zodiacal releasing in the ancient Greek text? And people are always asking me, like, can you check the text to see where zodiacal releasing is? Okay. Now, this was a word, a vocabulary word that was became popular through some of the historians of ancient Greek astrology. They're reading another translation than mine. I never codified a concept from the Greek into zodiacal releasing. There was never a chapter that I
Okay.
saw that I thought, oh, I'm going to name this zodiacal releasing, right? So they're popularizing a concept in English from the Greek text, and people want to know if it's real or not, right? And I'm a translator. I'm like, that's a codification of a concept that was in the Greek, and then they're popularizing that English rendering of some concept. But you see how it's like, it's
Doesn't
weird.
work. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Okay, Thorne. Okay, Thorne's saying it reminds me of how in English there's a sentence, there's a word, uh, in ASL there's a sign, it's a picture, it's very strong pictorial language. So that means that we're very visual and we tend to have a layer of a visual layer in our description, and there's all these pictures. So in English it's very sound based, right? It's based on sound. So it's very there's a rhythm to it. And, there's all these things set up. So for how to codify uh concepts in between those two, it means that we have to figure out the bridge uh of how to synthesize
Hmm.
those somehow. There's a middle ground of where we have to look at this from one side and say, okay, I understand this, and look at it from the other side and say, I also understand this at the same time. Yeah. And
Sorry, for me too, this also brings up the concept of signs that kind of try and fail. Like, so when hybrid cars came out, there was a few people that were doing half car, and it never caught on. It never became popular. It was a sign that was tried, and the community rejected it, and now we all just spell hybrid. It's a proper noun. And so I do think that's interesting though. And then as part of the linguistic process is those little sits and farts and spits and farts. And I'm trying to say fits and starts, and I'm saying spits and farts. So just
that
I
was
can hear
that was
it.
a
I
fun
just can't
linguistic
fix it
moment.
in the moment. So we just have these spits and farts happening. Um, Andy, to your point, it's gone, guys. I don't want to keep us here. If it's gone, go move on without me.
And I think to answer the question of the astrology community, is zodiacal releasing in the Greek? That's an English rendering of a Greek concept. So if you're tied to zodiacal releasing, you're tied to an English astrologer. Like
Mhm.
that's not a Greek astrology. That's um an English speaking person who made up that concept, kind of. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like, but the point of me asking about these two words is to make the point that some words you cannot translate with one word, right? It has to be a whole sentence. Or, what we do in the Moira Press books is if we arrive at one of those words, we give a footnote with the
Yes.
dictionary definition of all the possible definitions. For example, the word daimon, daimon. Okay, that became demon. Okay, but it's your highest spiritual self inside. It's your spirit guide. It's your oversoul. It's your inner genius. Like, see how I can't pick one? It's all of these things together are a daimon. Okay, so we didn't arrive at the word daimon and just pick an English word for it. We fingerspelled, we phonetically rendered the word in Greek, so you could say it in Greek. You would say, and the daimon of the chart is blah blah blah. What's a daimon? Oh, footnote, all the definitions. What do you think of that?
I love that.
Okay, Thorne. I love it. And also, that shows where, again, that there's a gap of where linguistics and, deaf scholarship and deaf access to understanding, uh, you know, the foundation, like some deaf people are super smart and they have privilege of having both languages, and exposure to both languages, and other deaf people don't have that privilege. Some deaf people grow up with very, very, very basic language awareness, home signs, and all these things, and there's a big range. And so, again, with astrology, I feel that that's where part of the gap is of where how the linguistics and the concepts, how to make it more accessible with, you know, to the general public, not just a subset, like one subset of who can access and understand that. So I find it fascinating with that discussion because it does apply to today's time, like as well as in the past as well. I'm sure in Greek time, there's deaf people there was deaf blind people, but the communication, I mean, was there interpreting? Was there translation? Um, it's the same idea today. And that access is still a big issue. So it's just really interesting to see how that little difference is there, but it's still the same conflict 2,000 years later. Yeah. Dana.
This is Dana, so I want to hold space for two thoughts. I do want to keep holding space for the concept of access, and that is a fight that is still going on today. Um, I love that Moira Press does provide options because, as Thorne was saying, people have different levels of access and education and awareness about astrology. I'm very green compared to you two. So I think that what you do when you give those options is you give people the empowerment to go on their own journey with the word and how they want to interpret it and how they want to translate it. I don't, that's I know as I just did. Um, and so I love that. I think you're empowering your readers and really meeting them like where they're at today when they read that book. And maybe it's a cherished book, and they'll go back 20 years later and be like, oh, that's so funny. I remember doing research on that. And I kind of decided for me it meant this, but then I met this scholar and he really opened my eyes. And now I think it means this. But you gave them that option. And I think that that is a fundamental part of access for any type of sacred text or, yeah, whatever.
Well, I think from a linguistic perspective, it's like I'm not on the history team. In fact, they don't like me. And that's fine. I'm in a different department. I'm like humanities, linguistics, and art, whatever, and their history. So that's fine. But I do have the skill to get through the text because I knew how to do like finger spelling in the book, or if the text is muddy, what do? You make a footnote and say like this like anyway, the point is the other translators got stuck where I did not. And I just think it's that astrology could use a group of us who focuses on translation scholarship and what that looks like, right? Um,
The Thorn is saying yay. And again, historically, who has been translating these texts? Has it been white men and their translations? Recently, I want to say maybe within the last 5 years, and I'm going to get this wrong, we'll have to go back and fix it, but a woman translated, I believe it was the Odyssey. And it was the first time a person identified as female translated Homer's Odyssey. I
wow.
butchered that, but that was the first time. And scholars of Homer and professionals who like teach this at universities are like, this is an incredible rendition because of her experience, because of her life. And so again, Andy, I'm just curious too if that has shaded your experience as identifying as a female person, as a translator who historically has been doing the translating. We're going back in that concept of gatekeeping, and maybe that's why there's been so many people getting stuck is because we haven't had enough non-binary, female identified people doing the work.
Interesting. You bring me to my question, and Dana, you're gonna have to come back next week. Because we only got through two questions of like the
Hey, bitch, two is better than zero.
yeah. Can
That's
you
what I tell the
next week
students.
for real? Can you come back?
I will check my schedule.
Okay, okay.
I'm very honored. Thank you.
Or when, because I want to get through all the translation talks with you here, if that's okay, because I think the three of us is better than, you don't have to commit now, but just think about being with us through this process. So you're bringing me to the question of, and this can be our last question for today. What makes a good interpreter for astrologers? If, Thorne wants to go to a conference, who are good interpreters for Thorne and why? I want to see Dana's thought on this one. Thorne's, and then I'll.
Well, I've had the privilege of interpreting for Thorne. Um, so again, it depends. No, I'm not trying. I'm not trying to stall. I just what I mean is that I think you do have to meet people where they're at. And so if Thorne is in New Orleans and there's like nobody who is astrology interested who also is an interpreter available, then the next best person would be somebody who is like Thorne, who is curious and passionate and wicked smart. And that interpreter would need to also be very humble and know that they need to show up at the job being ready to say, I'm a bit of a novice at this. Do you mind? Do you have 15, 20 minutes? Or can you send me a Zoom or a Glide with maybe like the top 10 signs? I looked over the pamphlet. I saw what the lectures are going to be on. I don't know this and this and this. But that any good interpreter has to be willing to make up for any knowledge that they might have when they show up to the assignment. So I would say that is paramount is being flexible, willing to learn, willing to stop and ask questions. I'm sorry, I think I might have voiced that wrong. Do you mind spell that again? So, but I think that's just general ethics. I'm not sure, Andy, if I'm actually answering your question.
Well, I mean, because you'd mentioned a queer non-binary translator might be better in some ways. Do you think a queer non-binary person is a better interpreter for an astrology conference, or does it not matter?
I don't think it matters. I think it's in the heart. I think it's that you show up with good intentions to do right by whatever's being said. And again, if you don't know, maybe your team is more knowledgeable. So maybe their turn is 20 and mine is 15. And they know that they're not really going to need a break because they're going to stay on and feed me the whole time. But I have to set that up as the least knowledgeable person. That's my responsibility as the person interpreting who's not as knowledgeable.
You're saying number one is a knowledge of astrology,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
best interpreter. And
That I
then
think that would
you're
be better. Yeah. But again, like I don't and I don't mean somebody who's not super deep into astrology wouldn't be a perfectly fine interpreter. But again, you would need to bring all your tools that you would bring to any situation to be the best, which is humbleness, willingness to listen, learn, stop, ask questions if it's appropriate. Obviously, if it's a very formal town hall and Thorne is talking, I'm not going to be like, hang on, wait, what? I mean,
yeah,
we figure that stuff out.
yeah.
But I don't know, Thorne. What are your thoughts?
Thorne saying yes. I could add that you're right. I agree with you that the key would be humility, open-mindedness, open-heartedness, and willing to do the work. Um, Also, we could say that, as a person who's deaf, if I was a client, most typically I would prefer an interpreter who I have the same identity with because it's easier to have a relationship with that person that way. And that's, I prefer that. But in general, a person who's an interpreter, who's willing to show up and do the work, that's the bottom line. That's the key. And they're willing to say, okay, um, you know, I'm humble. I'm equal. If the interpreter showed up and they were big-headed and say, I know everything, I know it all, I've been through this, and I'd be like, no, I don't really want you as my interpreter. Bye-bye. You know, so bye. Bye. So can I interpret that as bye, Felicia? But anyway, they have to be open-hearted, open-minded, humble, all these kinds of things. Um, so
I do think that the the question regarding if a queer or non-binary interpreter might be a better fit, I think that's a fascinating one, and I would like to tease that out a little bit more as to why that was posited, whether it was just simple curiosity or if there's maybe something deeper there. But no, in general, I've worked events with people that have no idea what we're talking about, but they again they did the work and showed up and were ready, and they were fucking phenomenal. So
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and this parallels the astrology community because some of the translators of the Vedic Valens books were non-astrologers. Some,
interesting.
I was an astrologer, so I think more than being female or non-binary, the fact that I was an astrologer made that a good translation. But I like what you're saying. It's these other personality traits too. You have to have hard work. I mean, even getting through the text, you have to be stubborn AF. You know what I mean? Like so. Okay, Thorne. And also, I noticed that with astrology in general, that community, um, deaf, queer, non-binary, trans, all of that, also they typically they have connecting interests. So it would be, for me personally, it would really hit me in the heart, and if I would can connect with my interpreter and have those, you know, overlays of identity, just understanding of where I can really see eye to eye with that, meet eye to eye. But then again, it's not required for the identity. It's not required. It's typically very open, and we're meeting different interpreters. And, I've met some interpreters who are just didn't know astrology, but they were very willing to learn and their heart was in the right place and they would just work really hard and pull up their sleeves. And other interpreters who already knew the topic maybe 10 years, but they still, were learning, and that was great too. That was cool. So there's a big variety. It's not required, but it would be nice. It's a perk.
It's like
Okay.
the cherry on top.
Okay, great discussion. I hope you two don't mind us weaving the astrology written translations with the deaf part of interpreting. I hope you don't mind that weaving together of things. I think it makes a rich show. Dana, I really want you to be one of our translation consultant people. So look at your schedule and see what you can do.
Very, very honored. This was an incredible, incredible experience. So thank you both so much for letting me have the opportunity to come on and ramble at you.
All right. Well, it's great. I'll see you all next week. All
All
right.
right, sounds good. Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye. Come and see.